Let's begin with the mouth, not just as a physical organ, but as a gateway between your internal world and the external one. What you say doesn't just inform others, it reveals who you are. It shapes your relationships, your reputation, and your self-concept. The unexamined mouth is dangerous. It spills emotions without filters, opinions without thought, and judgments without wisdom. And the consequences of that are not abstract, they are immediate, social, and sometimes irreversible. People think words are cheap. They're not. Words are commitments. Every time you speak, you're taking a position, whether you're aware of it or not. You're casting a vote for who you are and what you believe. The problem is, most of us talk far too much and think far too little about what we're actually saying. We react rather than respond. We vent rather than articulate, and in that process we surrender control. We let the mouth run ahead of the mind, and eventually we suffer for it. Now, psychologically, this is critical. If you constantly speak without discipline, you reinforce a mind that lacks structure. You habituate yourself to noise, and noise has no direction. It's chaos. When you gossip, for example, you're indulging in low-resolution judgment. You're simplifying complex human beings into caricatures, often for the cheap thrill of connection or superiority. But the cost is trust, and trust, once lost, is hard to recover. Or when you complain excessively, you wire your brain to see problems instead of solutions. You're literally rehearsing helplessness. On a deeper level, when your words are careless, your identity becomes fragmented. You speak in contradictions. You promise and don't deliver. You say what's convenient instead of what's true. That creates internal dissonance because your psyche wants integrity. It wants alignment between belief, word, and action. When those don't line up, you start to feel fake. You lose the ability to believe in yourself, and without that discipline in any area, mood, money, mind becomes infinitely harder. So what's the solution? Speak less, and when you do speak, speak deliberately. That doesn't mean becoming passive or silent. It means becoming precise. Say what you mean. Don't exaggerate. Don't manipulate. Don't speak just to fill the air. If you're unsure about something, admit it. If you're angry, articulate it without becoming cruel. Precision breeds clarity, and clarity is the foundation of truth. There's also a moral dimension to this. When you speak truthfully and constructively, you elevate not just yourself, but the entire conversation. You encourage honesty in others. You create spaces where real thinking can occur. But when you lie, even subtly, you inject corruption into the social fabric. You teach others to posture instead of participate. And we've got enough of that already. Now, I want to be clear. Control here doesn't mean repression. It doesn't mean swallowing every feeling or thought just to appear composed. It means channeling those feelings through a disciplined filter, a transforming raw emotion into refined expression. That takes practice. It takes humility, and it takes courage, because to speak with control is to take responsibility for what your words might do in the world. But the payoff is extraordinary. When people know that your words are thoughtful and trustworthy, they listen. Your voice carries weight. You become someone whose speech can calm storms or spark revolutions, not because you talk louder than others, but because you talk with more substance. So the challenge is simple, but not easy. Don't let your mouth run your life. Learn to wield it like a tool, not a weapon. Because once you control your mouth, you gain the first key to controlling your world. Asterisk asterisk, say only what you mean, and you'll become someone worth listening to. Asterisk asterisk. Certainly. Here's a 600-word expanded segment for key point 2 in the same intellectual, clear, and conversational style inspired by Jordan Peterson. Now that we've established how habits form the foundation of our lives, the next crucial step is to develop the ability to identify those habits that are working against us. This sounds straightforward, but it's deceptively complex. The habits that limit us don't announce themselves with fanfare or glaring neon signs. They often lurk beneath the surface of consciousness, woven so seamlessly into our routines that they become invisible. And therein lies the problem. You cannot change what you do not first recognize. Psychologically, this invisibility is partly because many negative habits provide short-term rewards or relief. They function as coping mechanisms, often unconscious ones, aimed at reducing discomfort or avoiding pain. For example, procrastination isn't just laziness. It's a psychological defense against fear of failure or imperfection. Overeating, excessive screen time, or impulsive spending may soothe anxiety or boredom temporarily, but the cost is deferred, accumulating silently until it manifests as frustration, poor health, or lost opportunities. This dynamic reveals something profound. Negative habits are not mere flaws or moral failings. They are symptoms of deeper psychological conflicts. The task, then, is not to shame ourselves for these habits, but to bring them into the light of conscious awareness. This requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to look unflinchingly at one's own behavior. To do this effectively, you must cultivate what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking and behavior. Philosophically, this aligns with the ancient idea of self-examination as the gateway to wisdom. Socrates famously declared, "Know thyself." Yet, true self-knowledge requires more than surface-level observation. It demands a systematic inquiry into the patterns that govern our daily lives. It's about asking, what am I doing repeatedly that is holding me back? And why do I continue to do it even though it harms me? One practical approach to this inquiry is to track your habits methodically. Write down your daily routines and the moments where you feel tension, discomfort, or dissatisfaction. Look for patterns. Do certain triggers prompt unhelpful behavior? For instance, stress might trigger avoidance, or social media scrolling might follow moments of loneliness. Awareness of these patterns creates a map for change, but awareness alone is not enough. The next layer of understanding is to recognize the function that these habits serve. What need do they fulfill? What emotional void do they attempt to fill? This insight allows you to begin addressing the root cause rather than simply attacking the symptom. It is easier to replace a habit if you understand the need it serves and can find healthier ways to meet that need. Furthermore, consider the environment in which your habits exist. Our surroundings, both physical and social, play a significant role in maintaining our habits. The philosopher Martin Heidegger spoke of being thrown into a world not of our own making. The conditions we inhabit often shape the ease or difficulty of changing behavior. If you want to change, you must change the context that supports your negative habits. This might mean reorganizing your environment, setting boundaries, or seeking out new communities that reinforce your desired habits. At this point, it's crucial to confront the discomfort that arises with self-examination. Many avoid this process because it threatens their current sense of identity. Changing habits means changing the narrative you tell yourself about who you are, and that can feel destabilizing. But this discomfort is not a sign to retreat. It is a signal of growth. To break free from limiting patterns, you must embrace this discomfort and move through it deliberately. So, ask yourself, what habits are you blindly carrying forward, simply because you haven't stopped to question them? What stories about yourself do these habits reinforce, and are those stories truly serving you? The clarity that comes from honest reflection is the first and most necessary step toward meaningful change. Remember, identifying negative habits is not about blame or guilt. It's about reclaiming control over your life. You have the capacity to bring these habits into awareness and dismantle them, habit by habit. And when you do, you create space for new, life-affirming patterns to take root. In the end, the question is not whether you have negative habits, everyone does, but whether you have the insight and courage to confront them. Because without this confrontation, true transformation remains out of reach. The power to change your life begins with the power to see clearly what must be changed. Would you like me to continue with the next key point in this style? Certainly. Here's a 600-word expansion of key point 3, continuing the intellectual, clear, and conversational style inspired by Jordan Peterson. When we think about change, there's often a temptation to imagine it as something dramatic, an overnight transformation, a sudden epiphany, a heroic leap from one state of being to another. But the reality is far more nuanced. True change happens incrementally, through the accumulation of small actions repeated consistently over time. This idea that small changes can produce big impacts is not just a motivational platitude. It is rooted deeply in psychological science and philosophical insight. At its core, the brain is wired to respond to gradual shifts rather than sudden upheavals. This is a survival mechanism. Sudden changes can be perceived as threats, triggering resistance or anxiety. Small, manageable adjustments, however, allow the brain to adapt and incorporate new patterns without overwhelming the system. This is why trying to overhaul your life all at once is often doomed to fail. The cognitive and emotional machinery that supports habits needs time to recalibrate. Consider the concept of compound interest, but applied to behavior. Just as small financial investments grow exponentially over time, small habit changes compound into significant transformations. Drinking an extra glass of water daily, walking 5 more minutes each day, reading 1 page every morning, these seemingly trivial actions, when sustained, rewire your brain and body. The key word here is consistency. The power lies not in a single heroic act, but in the quiet repetition that forms new neural pathways. This also connects to the philosophy of gradual self-improvement found in traditions across cultures. The ancient Stoics, for example, emphasized daily practice and reflection as the means to cultivate virtue. They understood that character is built not in grand gestures, but in everyday choices. What we do each day, over weeks and months, shapes the person we become. Psychologically, the focus on small changes serves another critical purpose. It reduces the cognitive load and emotional resistance associated with change. When a goal seems overwhelming, like losing a significant amount of weight or completely transforming your career, it triggers doubt and procrastination. But when you break it down into smaller, achievable steps, it becomes manageable. This taps into the brain's reward system. Achieving small goals releases dopamine, reinforcing the behavior and motivating further progress. Moreover, small changes create a positive feedback loop. Success breeds confidence, which fuels further action. This is an essential insight because many people give up before they truly begin, not because the goal is unattainable, but because they underestimate the value of incremental progress. They set unrealistic expectations and feel defeated when immediate transformation doesn't occur. There's also a philosophical dimension to this incremental approach that is worth highlighting. Life itself is a continuous process of becoming, not a static state to be attained suddenly. The idea of constant, small improvement aligns with the notion of telos, or purpose, as something realized over time. Each small habit you build is a step toward actualizing your potential, a movement toward a more fully developed self. Importantly, the small changes you make must be intentional and aligned with your values. Randomly adding habits without reflection risks creating busy work rather than meaningful progress. The change must be purposeful, aimed at nurturing the life you genuinely want to live. This is where clarity of vision meets disciplined action. In practice, this means focusing on habits that are both achievable and impactful. Instead of trying to revolutionize your entire routine, start with one habit that will make a noticeable difference. Maybe it's waking up 10 minutes earlier to plan your day, or replacing one sugary snack with fruit. Once that habit is established, layer in another. Over time, these small steps build a mosaic of change. Remember, it's not the scale of the change, but the direction that matters. Consistency in the right direction moves mountains. The challenge is patience and persistence, qualities that are cultivated through the very act of small habit change. So, I invite you to reflect on this. What small change could you make today that, if repeated tomorrow and the day after, would move you closer to the life you want? The transformation you seek is not in a single leap, but in the patient accumulation of small, intentional actions. Begin there and watch how the trajectory of your life gradually, inevitably, changes. Would you like me to continue with the next key point in this style? Certainly. Here's a 600-word expansion of key point 4, continuing with the clear, intellectual, and conversational style inspired by Jordan Peterson. Building new, positive habits is often presented as a simple task. Just do the right thing consistently, and you'll be fine. But this simplification overlooks the deep psychological and philosophical complexity involved in habit formation. The truth is, developing constructive habits is not merely about willpower or discipline. It's about creating a new framework for how you perceive yourself and your place in the world. The first step in building a positive habit is understanding that habits are closely tied to identity. When you decide to take on a new behavior, you are, in essence, inviting yourself to become a different kind of person. This is not a casual shift, it's a profound realignment of your self-concept. For example, if you want to become a writer, it's not enough to write occasionally. You must start to see yourself as someone who writes, who values expression and discipline, who prioritizes that work. This identity shift is critical because our brains are wired to seek consistency in self-perception. When your actions and identity align, your habits gain momentum naturally. Psychologically, one of the most effective strategies for building positive habits is to make them as easy and accessible as possible. This is often called reducing friction. The more barriers you remove between yourself and the habit, the more likely it is that you will repeat it. If you want to read more, keep the book in a visible place. If you want to exercise, have your workout clothes ready the night before. These small adjustments may seem trivial, but they leverage a fundamental truth about human behavior. We tend to choose the path of least resistance. Another key element is to connect new habits to existing ones, a strategy sometimes called habit stacking. Since habits are often triggered by specific cues, pairing a new habit with a well-established one creates a natural prompt. For example, after brushing your teeth, you might meditate for 2 minutes. The established habit acts as a reliable anchor for the new one, increasing the chances of consistent practice. There's also a crucial emotional dimension to habit formation. Positive habits are reinforced not only by external rewards, but by internal satisfaction. The feeling of competence, control, and progress fuels the desire to continue. This is why it's important to set realistic, incremental goals. When a new habit feels overwhelmingly difficult, it triggers resistance. But when it feels achievable, it becomes a source of positive feedback, a small victory that encourages repetition. Philosophically, this aligns with the concept of eudaimonia, or flourishing, as discussed by Aristotle. Flourishing is not about indulging in momentary pleasures, but about developing virtues and strengths through disciplined practice. Building positive habits is a modern expression of this ancient idea. Each new habit you cultivate is a step toward living a fuller, more meaningful life. Importantly, building habits is also about resilience and adaptability. You will face setbacks, days when motivation wanes or circumstances disrupt your routine. This is not a sign of failure, but a natural part of the process. What matters is how you respond. Developing a mindset that sees setbacks as opportunities for learning rather than defeat is essential. This resilience strengthens the habit over time and deepens your commitment to growth. Another often overlooked aspect is the role of community and environment. Surrounding yourself with people who embody the habits and values you aspire to adopt creates a powerful support system. Social norms and shared practices reinforce individual habits, making change easier and more sustainable. The environments we inhabit either support or undermine our efforts to change. Being intentional about where and with whom you spend your time is part of habit formation. Finally, building positive habits requires patience. Change does not happen overnight. The neurological changes in your brain that support new behaviors take time, weeks, months, sometimes longer. This is why it's critical to cultivate a long-term perspective. The goal is not perfection, but progress, not instantaneous transformation, but steady evolution. So consider this. What new habit could you begin today that aligns with the person you want to become? How can you make it simple, connected, emotionally rewarding, and supported by your environment? Remember, the habits you build are the scaffolding of your character and your life. To change your future, start by building habits that reinforce the identity you aspire to embody. Would you like me to proceed with the next key point in this style? Certainly, here's a 600-word expansion of key point 5, maintaining the intellectual, clear, and conversational style inspired by Jordan Peterson. Change is rarely a smooth journey. The path of habit transformation is littered with obstacles, setbacks, and moments of doubt. If you want to change your habits, and by extension, change your life, You must prepare yourself to face these challenges with resilience and persistence. Understanding the nature of these obstacles is crucial because it allows you to anticipate, rather than be blindsided by, the difficulties that will inevitably arise. At the psychological level, one of the primary challenges is the tension between the old self and the new self you're trying to become. Habits are deeply embedded in the brain's architecture. They are neural pathways carved over years of repetition. Changing them requires not just learning new behaviors, but rewiring these pathways. This rewiring process is not comfortable. It often triggers resistance and discomfort. The brain, wired for efficiency and safety, prefers the familiar, even if the familiar is harmful. This explains why, despite our best intentions, we sometimes revert to old habits when stressed or fatigued. The familiar pathway is easier to follow, even if it leads us nowhere good. Philosophically, this resistance can be understood through the concept of the shadow, as described by Carl Jung. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves we deny or reject, often the habits and impulses we know are harmful. To change, we must confront this shadow, acknowledge it without judgment, and integrate it into our conscious awareness. This confrontation is a form of inner courage. Without it, transformation remains superficial and short-lived. Another obstacle is the erratic nature of motivation. Motivation fluctuates naturally. Some days you feel driven and focused, other days tired and distracted. If you rely solely on motivation to sustain new habits, you will inevitably falter. This is why systems matter more than feelings. Building structures and routines that support your habits can carry you through low motivation phases. For instance, scheduling your workouts at the same time daily creates a ritual that becomes independent of how motivated you feel in the moment. Consistency is difficult because it demands ongoing effort, often with delayed rewards. The brain craves immediate gratification, but the benefits of habit change: better health, greater productivity, improved relationships unfold gradually. This delay breeds impatience and doubt. You might wonder if the effort is worthwhile, or if change is even possible. Here, philosophical patience becomes essential. Change is a process, not an event. The willingness to persist through uncertainty and delay distinguishes those who succeed from those who give up. Self-compassion also plays a crucial role in overcoming challenges. When setbacks occur, as they inevitably will, it's vital to resist the impulse toward harsh self-criticism. Viewing failure as evidence of inadequacy only reinforces negative habits and saps motivation. Instead, see setbacks as data points, opportunities to learn and adjust your approach. This mindset transforms obstacles into stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. Importantly, the social environment influences your ability to stay consistent. Isolation can breed discouragement and relapse. Conversely, support systems, friends, mentors, communities provide accountability, encouragement, and a sense of shared struggle. Engaging with others who share your goals creates a network of mutual reinforcement, making the hard work of change more sustainable. There's also a deeper existential dimension to this struggle. Changing habits isn't merely about external behavior. It's about realigning your life with meaning and purpose. Viktor Frankl, in his exploration of human resilience, showed that those who find meaning even in suffering can endure hardships with greater fortitude. When your habit change is connected to a clear sense of why, your deeper purpose, you develop an internal reservoir of strength that sustains you through difficulty. So, what does all this mean for you? It means that obstacles are not signs of failure. They are part of the terrain. The challenge is not to avoid resistance or discomfort, but to engage with it intelligently and courageously. Build routines that support you, cultivate patience, lean on your community, and connect your habits to your sense of purpose. Ask yourself, how will you respond the next time you face doubt, fatigue, or a setback? Will you allow the old patterns to reclaim you, or will you meet the challenge as an opportunity to strengthen your resolve? Remember, mastery of your habits is mastery over yourself, and that is the foundation of meaningful change. The journey is hard, but it is also profoundly rewarding. If you can endure the discomfort of change, you will emerge stronger, more capable, and more fully yourself. The question is not if you will face obstacles, but how you will meet them. Choose resilience, and your life will change accordingly. Would you like me to continue with the final key point? Certainly. Here's a 600-word expansion of key point 6, crafted in the same clear, intellectual, and conversational style inspired by Jordan Peterson, as we reach the final consideration in this exploration of habit and transformation. It's essential to confront the reality that sustaining change is, in many ways, the greatest challenge of all. It's one thing to initiate a new habit, to feel the surge of motivation, the novelty of beginning something new. It's another thing entirely to maintain that habit over the long haul, to embed it so deeply into your life that it becomes part of your identity and your ongoing practice. Sustaining change demands vigilance and deliberate care, because human nature tends toward entropy, toward disorder, stagnation, and decay if we do not actively oppose it. Psychologically, the brain is constantly negotiating between the comfort of familiar routines and the uncertainty of change. It's wired to conserve energy and avoid threats, which means old habits have a persistent gravitational pull. This gravitational pull is subtle but powerful. It can lull us into complacency or cause us to slip back into behaviors we thought we had left behind. Philosophically, this dynamic reflects a fundamental truth about life, that order is hard, won, and must be continually reasserted. The ancient wisdom traditions speak of life as a constant battle between chaos and order. Change represents order emerging out of chaos, but it requires continual effort to maintain. The moment you relax vigilance is the moment order begins to erode. This is not a failure, but the natural rhythm of life, one that demands ongoing commitment. In practice, sustaining change means that you must develop strategies for renewal and reflection. Habits, once established, can become automatic, which is both their strength and their vulnerability. Automaticity means you don't have to expend willpower constantly. The behavior happens effortlessly. But it also means you can fall into autopilot, losing awareness of whether the habit still serves your higher goals. This is why periodic reflection is crucial. Ask yourself regularly, does this habit continue to align with who I want to be? Does it still support my growth and well-being? Another vital aspect of sustaining change is adaptation. Life is unpredictable, circumstances shift, new challenges arise, and rigid adherence to habits without flexibility can lead to frustration or failure. Instead, cultivate a mindset of adaptive persistence. This means holding your goals and values firmly, but being willing to adjust the methods and habits you use to achieve them. Sometimes sustaining change means innovating, experimenting, and learning, not sticking dogmatically to a fixed routine. Social reinforcement remains critical here as well. The communities and relationships we cultivate act as anchors for our habits and identities. They provide not only encouragement but also accountability. When you identify with a group that shares your values, your habits are reinforced by social norms and expectations. This social dimension is often underestimated, but is one of the most powerful forces in sustaining long-term change. Equally important is cultivating a deep sense of purpose connected to your habits. Without a meaningful why, habits can feel like chores, and the energy to maintain them wanes. When your habits are integrated into a larger vision of your life, when they express your values and aspirations, they become sources of motivation that outlast fleeting moods or external circumstances. At a deeper level, sustaining change is an ongoing process of becoming rather than a final state of being. It requires humility to recognize that no matter how far you've come, growth is never complete. The path of improvement is lifelong. Each day presents new opportunities to recommit to your habits, to refine them, and to deepen your self-understanding. To put it plainly, the true measure of change is endurance. It's not about how quickly you start, but how consistently you continue. And this endurance is a form of courage to face the slow, sometimes tedious work of becoming the person you aspire to be. So I ask you, how will you sustain your change when the initial excitement fades? How will you maintain the discipline and self-reflection necessary to keep your habits alive and meaningful? The future you desire depends not just on starting well, but on enduring well. Remember, the power to change your life lies not in moments of inspiration alone, but in the quiet, persistent commitment to your habits day after day. When you embrace this reality, you transform change from a fleeting event into a lifelong journey. And in that journey, you discover the true depth of your potential. Would you like me to help you weave all these expanded points into a complete speech, or assist with anything else?